Welcome to Series Talk from the NIRSA Championship Series. I'm David Peters from Florida State University.
And I'm Marty Dempsey from the University of Florida.
Well, Marty, you know this is our big edition to talk about the work of the task force. 15 leaders, you can see them on screen right now, got together in Atlanta back in June for 3 days of discussion about where the series needs to go. In 2006, that's when the series launched. It's been over a decade, and so it was time to regroup and talk about what needs to be changed, what needs to be enhanced to take the series forward. And Marty, that was morning, noon, and night of discussions, some long days, but some great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. This was definitely not your typical conference experience. There are many different facets involved in making this series successful. And it took a long time to really break down each of those to come up with this new plan. Big shout out, first of all, to our facilitator, Ted Servata. He was great in helping us keep us on point, move us from one topic to the other. He actually, familiarity with NIRSA, he worked with the NIRSA parent board on the NIRSA strategic plan. We had both large and small group discussion. We had flip charts, we had Post-its, we had different activities, a lot of engagement throughout that 3 days. Really focused on our staff, our participants, our volunteers, our structure, and a whole assortment of other topics that came up in relation to the series.
As you saw, Marty and I were blessed to be part of that group, but we also took a lot of your comments and feedback from what we've heard over the years, our own tournament experiences, talking to many of our members at these different conference opportunities, as well as our tournaments. And plus, your opportunity for feedback in May was so important because we took those comments we heard from you and really helped to bring the discussion forward and move us forward on 4 different areas. And our goal today in this podcast is to review that work and talk about those 4 different areas. They are purpose, promise, principles, and priorities. We're going to hit those one by one and also have some other members of the task force join us to talk through their input and what they felt like came out of the discussions in Atlanta. So let's first talk about our purpose. Why does the series exist? And it gets boiled down to just this simple statement. The NIRSA Championship Series is dedicated to providing experiential learning through sport.
Yeah, and for this one, Dave, this is one of my favorites that comes from it. And I think the beauty is really in the simplicity of the statement. Experiential learning is something that has been a staple of the series since its inception. It's not new to us. But when we are talking about this to administrators and people that are not as familiar with it, those 4 words, experiential learning through the forum of sport, adds just so much purpose to what we do. We are more than competition. We are about student development for everybody that's involved, whether that be a player, an official, a volunteer staff member. These programs afford growth opportunities that you just don't get in the classroom setting. Sport really has a way of uniting us all.
And we hope that the purpose statement really is something you can take and share with others on your campus as we talk about the story and what we're doing to help connect the competitive aspect with the development aspect. And Marty, you said it very well there. I think that really, with just a few words, encapsulates very well what our purpose is here in the series. Next up on our list there was promise. What do our participants expect? What should they expect? What are we promising them with what we are delivering? And the promise from the NIRSA Championship Series that the task force crafted is this. The series provides premier championship experiences delivered by qualified experts within a safe and inclusive environment. And so, Marty, that's really got 3 different key items, the first being premier championship experiences. And of course, we can't deny that we're running competitions, and many of our players come to take home that trophy.
Yep. Yeah, there's a couple of different facets within that phrase alone. When you talk about premier, we are trying to be a premier experience, regardless of whether or not you walk home with that championship or not. The participant experience, and we'll get to this later in the priorities, has got to be a staple of what we do. Without participants, we just don't exist. But then also including that championship too. And each one of ours, that is something that unites us within the series, is that we are still about competition. That is at our core. People are still competing for a championship. It's a lot of the reason why people come. But regardless, that premier word there really talks about creating that unified experience for everybody, regardless of trophy or not.
That second key element in there is qualified experts. And that's what I'm real proud of, because I feel like with intramural sports and sport clubs and what we're doing with competitive sports on our own campuses, we are the experts. NIRSA members are the experts in putting on something like this for our college-age participants. So, Marty, talk more about that. I mean, certainly expertise. Let's show it off.
Sure, absolutely. At its base level, and you talk about those experts. You start with the officiating side of things. We are getting recognized by other groups. The NBA has a lot to do with even on our basketball side. We're trying to get more involved with people within soccer, our football. We have a lot of our NIRSA members that have gone on to great careers refereeing at higher levels of football. So from that side of things, you can really see the expertise. But we also know we work with a lot of groups on campus that have deal with these types of events. When we talk about bracket generation and communication and all of that, we really are the experts when it comes to that. But I think when we talk about this, as far as our promise to people, our expertise goes well beyond just officiating mechanics, bracket generation, policy creation. It's really about the transferable skills that you are getting from a growth mindset as a student, a volunteer, anybody that is participating with this. That's what sets us apart. It's those transferable life skills that we make such an essential part of the series. And research has shown that involvement in the series increases our toolbox in regards to communication, conflict resolution, teamwork, and other facets of that. I think that really does help set us apart when we talk about the term qualified experts.
Well, and the last key part of our promise is the environment, and a safe and inclusive environment. And it almost goes without saying that we don't want to put on something that's unsafe at a competitive site, for example, or venue. But we also want the atmosphere to be safe so that all of our players feel welcomed. And inclusivity is very important to NIRSA as one of our key values as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is really a hallmark of who we are. No matter the demographic, it is really essential that our participants feel welcome when they come to any of our programs, from the start, with the start of the communication to our policies for that, all the way up until they leave. The series has done a number of things over the years to be on the forefront of inclusivity, going out and being represented on a couple of different facets at the Special Olympics USA Games in Seattle. So it's important that we call that piece out, because it really is instrumental to who we are.
Absolutely. And I mentioned earlier college-age participants and our expertise towards that. But as you've already mentioned, other groups are being part of the series now, certainly with some of our unified connections. So we're looking at all kinds of different participants, whether they are players, whether they are volunteers. And we feel like the series can promise these things to create a great experience going forward. Now, the next part of the task force work was identify guiding principles, or our principles. And there has been a list of these principles, which are kind of like values that we hope to instill in all of the leaders and the volunteers from now into the future, kind of something that's going to carry forward as some of our seasoned veterans move out and new leaders come in. What are the principles that will continue to guide the series going forward? And so let's take a look at that list, which has existed since 2006, but it got a little modification, and it looks like this now. To ensure the integrity of the series, staff and volunteers will support the mission, vision, and strategic values of NIRSA, to lead with open and honest communication. And Marty, I feel like the SeriesTalk right here is one of the elements that we're trying to bring to members in the vein of being open and honest with communication, and to provide and promote student and professional development. And I think we all would agree that that's certainly happening at our series events.
Yeah, and then the other three are, we're committing to that NIRSA Championship Series promise that we had just talked about. That is an important aspect of who we are. It's a new creation to it. So in our guiding principles, we want to make sure that we are promoting that at all times. Manage fiscal and other resources responsibly. We want to make sure that we are good stewards of the money that we receive, as we know that there are quite a few expenses that come with putting on these events. We want to make sure that we're being responsible in that regard. And then foster a culture of assessment and research. We know that assessment and data-driven decisions is important to who we are. It goes back actually to that fiscal and resource responsibility, right? Use assessment, use data in order to make our key decisions moving forward.
And so we've got three out of the way, and they really are kind of the groundwork, our purpose, our promise, our principles. What's our footing? What are we standing on? That is what we've got. What's next? And those are the priorities. The group really took a good chunk of the time to talk about what we need to be doing. What do the next 3 to 5 years look like? And what are the key aspects of the series that need the most focus and attention and work?
Yeah, Dave, and earlier this week, I had a chance to sit down with a couple of our task force members to talk about just that and their thoughts on our 4 strategic priorities. Welcome to 2 of our task force members who are gracious enough to give us some of their time today. Brooke Turner, of course, is the Associate Director of Programs at the University of Alabama, and Jacob Tingle is currently the Director of Experiential Learning at Trinity University. Brooke, Jacob, welcome to the show. So we are talking about the new strategic priorities for the NIRSA Championship Series over the next 3 to 5 years. These areas of focus will certainly help guide action plans to advance different aspects of the series. So the first one that we will touch on in this series is that we will develop measures to evaluate operational success. Brooke, I want to start with you on this one. Each tournament can gauge success in a different way. We know that. Team numbers are certainly important. It's going to be paramount to what we do. We need teams to survive. But what are some of the other factors that we're discussing when we talk about operational success?
Operational success looks different for different sports, different hosts. So some of that is the priorities of the series, and some of that can be priorities on campus as well. So we want tournaments to be financially viable. We want the human resources that are going into it on their campus and the people that are coming in to grow and benefit from the experience and take that back. We want to make sure that people are getting experiential learning. So that could be our officials, that could be student staff members from that institution, that could be professional staff members at the institution. So we want to make sure that there's growing and learning going on just beyond putting on a sporting event, and that it is helping them prepare for jobs in industry or whatever field they may be going into. But that can also be our teams and captains, especially as we think about the sport club side of the house. So what are they getting in planning and traveling to these events and while they're there as well?
Yeah. You talk about that experiential learning piece, Jacob. I know that that is a big part of what you do at Trinity, and you have done a great deal when it comes to assessment and research and how that impact is in the series. Can you talk a little bit about how assessment experiential learning will be an important driving force going into the future?
Yeah, one of the things that I think a lot of folks maybe watching the show will understand anecdotally, maybe, again, maybe through their own experiences or conversations they have with folks who have extensive tournament experience, is that the series does impact students and professionals and graduate assistants who volunteer. But we're in a climate in higher education where individual stories matter, but data maybe matter more, and stories can help can help explain the data in ways that are important. But assessment is going to be really paramount to make sure that our campuses who host tournaments, our campuses who allow teams to participate, who spend good money on teams to participate, our campuses who send volunteers, our campuses who send referees and graduate assistants to get work, that they understand that their money is being wisely spent and being spent effectively. And so that's where I think assessment can be and will be very important to make sure that we as a series are able to provide justification to campus recreation directors, to provosts, to assistant provosts, to folks who are making budgetary decisions, that this is money well spent that leads to retention, that leads to higher levels of persistence, that leads to graduation, increased graduation rates, and then, like Brooke alluded to, that leads to important job skills. And so I think that's why assessment at series events, kind of for all of the stakeholder groups, will be vitally important to the continued success of the series.
Sure, absolutely. You talked about some of those volunteer opportunities. That moves us right into that second priority, which is to educate members for volunteer opportunities. How do we continue to help prepare our young leaders for future leadership opportunities? So, Jacob, can you talk about some of the concepts and ideas that were discussed to help achieve that goal?
Yeah, so Dan Hazlett and April Flint and a colleague at Incarnate Word, Dr. Griffiths and I have done some research specifically focused on volunteerism at series events, and have found that through volunteering, our members of the profession, NIRSA professionals perceive themselves to be better leaders, perceives themselves to be better communicators, perceive themselves to be better educators. There are some gaps that our research has found, and that's where I think the volunteer training, the continuing education piece is going to be vitally important to ensure that these skills, these lessons aren't just happening accidentally, and that we're being really intentional to make sure to provide these opportunities, to ensure that the volunteer opportunities are actually really valuable for again, all of the stakeholder groups.
Sure. Absolutely. You know, we love our professional development when it comes to our student officials, our volunteers on staff, our staff members that dedicate so much of their time. But let's turn our attention for a moment to our participants. They're really the bread and butter for what we are. We wouldn't exist without them. We talked earlier in the show about our promise, our new promise to create a premier championship experience. So our next priority is to focus strategically on that participant experience. Brooke, can you detail some of the motivation behind that priority?
Yes. So we are seeing growing numbers in some sports, especially on the sport club side of the house. But unfortunately, flag football, which is beloved by our NIRSA membership, we have not seen that growth. And actually, we've seen a decline in numbers, both on campuses and at our events. And so some of that is, I think we've moved away from a culture on campus where we talk about that a lot and talk about going to events. Some of that money and funding is dried up. So we really need to be strategic about talking about what those students are getting at the events, telling that story, making sure that's getting down to the student bodies on our campus so that they know we exist. And so we want to make sure that when they go and are attending, that they have a really great experience time, that they're getting something out of it. They feel like they're getting a good value for what they're paying into it. So they go back home, tell their friends and their family about it, and hopefully more people will come and attend, because if we don't have team members, then other people won't get to enjoy it in the future. And so oftentimes we get so excited about the student development and professional development from the membership side of things that I think occasionally the participants have been on the back burner of it. And so we just wanted to put that out there in writing to bring it into consciousness, so we're actively making decisions on their behalf as well.
Sure. Flag football is certainly one of those that's going to have a hard look at it this year. I think it's a great testing ground for us, because so many of us are very passionate about that sport. It's where a lot of us got our start when it comes to the series. And you talk about telling that story, to really truly engage people in what the impact is of the series. And that really is our final priority, which is to communicate the impact of involvement in series events. We have many passionate individuals that have been a part of the series since its inception, and our net only gets bigger every time that we introduce young professionals into the field to contribute. So, Jacob, let's start with you here on this one. Who should we be targeting in conveying that impact of the series?
Yeah, and I think some of these groups have already been kind of touched on a little bit by both Brooke and myself, but I view 3 or 4 different stakeholder groups as really important, and the messaging is going to be important and maybe different for each one of those groups, right? I mean, just picking up on where Brooke left off with the participant experience. At the end of the day, if our participants aren't coming, if they don't see value in however they define it, if they don't see value through participating in tennis or soccer or basketball or flag football, it's a nice theoretical experiment or thought experiment, but you got to have teams playing, right? And so I think from my perspective, that might be the most important stakeholder group to communicate to, because if we can get teams excited, I think that gets coordinators excited, assistant directors excited, associate directors excited, and directors excited, right? If they know that their participants want to go to events, then I think you're more likely to have some support. With that said, I think there's also a top-down approach, right? If we can get our directors understanding that a $500 check or whatever it might cost to go to a tournament, to support travel, to support, gas or, van fees or whatever those things are. If we can get them understanding from a learning outcome standpoint, right? So that's a different, I don't think our participants are going to be so geeked about the learning outcome standpoint. Am I going to have a good time, right? Am I going to get 3 games, or am I going to whatever that experience is? Am I going to have a social event? Am I going to get to meet people from other campuses? I don't know that our directors care as much about that. Our directors might care more about what are those learning outcomes, some of the stuff focused on persistence and marketable skills and some of the NACE skills and some of the other things that we've talked about. And so I think those are 2 really important stakeholder groups that are going to be very different kinds of messages. Another stakeholder group that I think is going to be really important that we figure out how to tell our story to, and tell both the volunteer story, but also the participant story, is to potential sponsors, right? And so, from my own perspective, having grown up, you mentioned flag football, having grown up and cut my teeth as a flag football official and then going through that route, knowing that there's a shortage in officials nationally and really internationally, is there a way that we can speak to some of the officiating associations that through their potential partnerships, might there be a way to create a pipeline there? So I think messaging to different stakeholder groups will be very, very important for the continued life of the series.
Yeah. And you talk about experiential learning, and that has been an integral part of who we are again, right? So, but a story is only as good as its storyteller. So we've got to get that message out there. So, Brooke, can you talk about some ways that we can help better target communication efforts, both internal and external, to the series?
I think, one, it starts with some of our coordinators and our professionals that are doing intramural and club sports, and them talking about it on campus to their participants. So as the series, we can't get on campus and talk to our participants without those professionals. So getting the word out there, the series exists to those participants, is an important part of that. And, in my time in NIRSA, I think we did a better job of that maybe a little bit longer ago. Maybe we're leaning a little too much on social media and electronic platforms. And sometimes it's simple as having those conversations when we're out at the fields with some teams and say, hey, y'all are a really great team. I think you'd really match up well with some big schools across the country. And this is a way you can do that. But also, I think that we need to take advantage of social media and other platforms to tell our story. I know that the administration at my institution pays attention to Twitter. So I'm going to put out information on Twitter about leadership, about the series, about what we're doing, because that's an opportunity that some people might see that and learn what we're doing. To talk about it in casual conversation so that people ask more about it is another way to do that. But we put together a strategic communication plan and identified over 20 stakeholder groups that could potentially be used to get out information. So whether that's in the membership or outside the membership, the USTA, when we do tennis with them, does a really great job of reaching out into the markets that our students are coming from and saying, Tuscaloosa market, you've got a team here, this is what they're doing, this is a personal interest story about that. So how can we kind of tap into some of those resources, get it out to local papers that may be in a down period of time for them, that they could get some personal interest stories about students that are in that area out.
Absolutely. Well, there's certainly some exciting work. You two have been a part of this group that's put together so much. We thank you for all of the time that you have put into that, and outside of your regular day-to-day opportunities at your university. So I wanted to thank you again for the roles that you've served in, for taking some time with us today and providing some insight on the Series 2.0 task force. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been our pleasure.
Thanks, Marty.
Well, from operational success to educating our members to the participant experience to communicating the series impact, there's a lot on our plate going forward from the task force work and a lot of those priorities in the months ahead. If you are interested in joining, please do. We need members, not just those of you who are already on a series committee, but just people who are passionate about the series to be involved. You can send us an email with comments, suggestions about what we've talked about today, or just your interest in being part of the solutions going forward. That's at SeriesTaskForce@NIRSALeaders.org. Again, SeriesTaskForce@NIRSALeaders.org, or go online to NIRSAPlay.com and look for the link there, see how you can contribute going forward. There's also things to do right now with flag football and soccer and opportunities to volunteer. Marty, what's on tap for volunteer opportunities this fall?
Yeah, Dave, right now, currently open. Our flag football regional staff and directors application is currently open. On the soccer side, the national staff application is currently open. The regional soccer application opens this week. So do check out the NIRSA website for information on all of those. And ahead of our first regional tournaments, which happen in just about 2 months from now in October 19th through the 21st, will be the first regionals of the semester for both soccer and flag football.
Now, the series is off and running with yet another year of great sports, and we also have work to do. We thank you for joining us today for this extended edition of Series Talk, and we hope you can see the vision going forward for the next 3 to 5 years. For Marty Dempsey, I'm David Peters. We'll see you next month when we talk about flag football, soccer, and have an interview with Ashley Lax to talk club basketball. That'll be next month. For now, I'm David. That's Marty. This is Series Talk from NIRSA Championship Series and NIRSA, Leaders in Collegiate Recreation.
Have a great start of the fall.